Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. An overheated atmosphere, much tougher fighters, and an enemy that has lost its footing. The latest news from the theater of operations favors the FDS and VDP, supported by air assets. Here are the latest updates from the front for you. In recent weeks, there has been a lull in fighting on the theater of operations as well as in territorial gains. The fighting forces have launched bold operations deep into enemy territory and have reclaimed several areas abandoned since 2019, such as Tango Mahal, Belede, and Pobemengao. During these operations, the most intense battles of this war took place, with resounding victories by the newly formed Sahel Expeditionary Youth Companies. First of all, on February 16th, the BIR 29 units on reconnaissance in the Pini area, north of Ding, made contact with an enemy who was thoroughly subdued and equipment was recovered. That same day, in Kanchari, an enemy pair on bicycles was spotted, but they fled before the forces arrived, abandoning their bicycle and a weapon. On February 19th, the Special Intervention Group of BIR 27 went out on reconnaissance and encountered an enemy pair who were neutralized. On February 20th, criminals launched an attack in Jembire, in Nakambe, which was quickly repelled by the valiant fighting forces. The enemy fled, abandoning some equipment. That same day, at the Indikaon unit in the Lankwe area, the valiant forces ambushed a group of criminals, neutralizing several of them. From February 23rd to 25th, based on intelligence, the Onroya attack force launched an offensive against terrorist positions in the Korolai and Bantoro areas, not far from the Maun River. Several criminals were neutralized there, others were taken prisoner, and equipment was recovered. On February 24th, units of the 18th Biram patrolling in the Le Koro area neutralized enemy scouts who had come to gather information. On Friday the 27th, criminals attempted to seize a position held by the valiant forces at Komboari in the Fadangurma area. They were thoroughly subdued there. They abandoned their weapons and corpses there. Most of the operations took place in the northern part of the country in support of ground units. After the criminals suffered defeat in the attack against civilians in Titao on February 14th, they shifted westward to target the positions of the fighting forces in the locality of Barga. Arriving in large numbers, they were stopped by the response of the forces on the ground. It was at that precise moment that the aerial assets came into play with a strike that threw them into disarray. Then further strikes followed against them. They were caught during their retreat to the north and struck down effectively. The units pursued them and neutralized the survivors. Since February 19th, the criminals, having failed in their attempt in the western sector, shifted once again to the eastern sector, where they had also suffered a crushing defeat on February 8th, 2026, at the hands of our combat forces present in the Tongomail and Beliede area. They launched a simultaneous attack on the forces at Tongomail and Beliede with several hundred criminals, but it was all in vain. They were thoroughly subdued by the two units. The Sahel expeditionary companies based at these bases showed no mercy. They filmed the battle and the enemy's retreat, then pursued and eliminated as many as possible. They are thoroughly subdued by the group of men on the ground, who are watching them closely in their disarray. Here, a group of criminals trying to rescue their wounded comrades is now just a corpse. They are unaware that they are being watched by our forces, who will ultimately neutralize them. The enemy is trying by all means, through their numbers, to overwhelm our forces. The sky fighters set course for Tongomail and see the valiant ground forces subduing the enemy. The men force them to regroup in a corner while the aerial vectors strike them down. The survivors try to flee, but it's a lost cause. The sky fighters don't let them make a run for it. They are struck down. After the fighting, the units will sweep the areas around their respective bases to finish the job in Beliede. In Villain, more than 100 criminals will be killed and a large quantity of weapons and ammunition of all kinds recovered. Their corpses are scattered all over the ground around the base and at Tongomail as well. On February 19th, the sky fell on their heads. They intended to film their attack on the scene for their propaganda purposes. Convinced of their success, they filmed their gathering before the assault, as you can see here. More than 1,000 criminals gathered there to launch an assault on 2 companies. These images of their gathering were taken well before they attempted to attack our forces. Many of them were decimated. The cameramen were also killed by our forces, and their equipment and footage were recovered, giving us access to these images of their assembly. Operations are ongoing.
And next we welcome the spokesperson of the National Armed Forces, Lieutenant Colonel Abdul Aziz Ouedraogo. Good evening, Colonel. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Welcome, Kansa.
After its defeat last February, the enemy attempted other actions.
Yes, absolutely. You saw it in the footage. The enemy attempted other actions. All of these attempts ended in crushing failures. Our men carried out targeted actions in certain areas. They also conducted sweeping operations deep into the territory. You were able to see that the response and counterattacks carried out by our men caused the terrorists to scatter in disarray. And we also observed a strengthening of our men's human and material capabilities.
A strengthening in human resources because newly assembled units were brilliantly deployed in the field, and a strengthening in material resources because, as you may recall, last week we carried out landing shots with newly acquired equipment thanks to the taxpayers of Burkina Faso. So the enemy did try, yes, but all their attempts ended in failure.
Yes, the recent battles on the ground have been exceptionally intense. What should we take away from this?
That the intensity of recent fighting, far from breaking the momentum of our forces, only serves to strengthen their professionalism, their resilience, and also to demonstrate the fighting spirit our units possess. The units are showing a remarkable combat culture. They are demonstrating tactical discipline as well as tactical adaptability. What do I mean by tactical adaptability? It is the ability of our units to change the way they operate, taking into account the nature of the enemy, their posture, and their terrain, and taking into account the threats they face. And this tactical adaptability has made it possible, as we saw in the footage, to shift from a defensive posture to an offensive one, which led to routing the enemy and causing them to flee.
Colonel, areas that previously escaped our men's control are being recovered. Yes.
If you have noticed, for some time now, we have been in an overall positive dynamic. The units have adopted a more offensive strategy, and you know very well that in order to conquer areas, movement is essential. So it is through movement that we can set foot in certain areas. It is through movement that we can force the enemy to leave these areas. And it is through movement that we can neutralize as many enemies as possible and allow for the gradual return of the population to these areas once they have been secured.
The results are remarkable. At least 100 terrorists have been neutralized, not counting the colonels.
The results are remarkable. This is an opportunity for me to reiterate the congratulations of the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, as well as the highest authorities of Burkina Faso, to the fighting forces, and to the volunteers for the defense of the homeland, because they are doing remarkable work on the ground. These results are due to the effectiveness of our training. It is also thanks to the improved inter-arm coordination we have for ground troops for support and air assets, as well as the collaboration we have with the various local populations. Congratulations to the boys. May they continue to stay the course and achieve victory at Aubo.
What should be noted is the rise in strength of new companies.
Indeed, you are talking about the Sahel Expeditionary Company. These units are units that have been forged through contact with the enemy and have been shaped in combat. It must be said that the experience we have gained over time allows us to adapt the training of these units, then to provide them with training that is endogenous, that matches the realities on the ground. And you were able to see the dexterity with which they routed the enemy, the great tactical discipline they demonstrated, and above all, and I will never stop repeating it, the determination and love they have for their country to defend it no matter the cost.
Yes, what can be said about the morale and mindset of our men?
Regarding the morale and mindset of our men, it must be said that morale is very high and their mindset is positive. The men are showing unwavering determination. Their hunger for victory grows day by day. They have demonstrated great resilience, both mentally and morally, as well as a physical ability to engage the enemy directly. We have large units that are capable of conducting operations with a certain intensity. And finally, our men have a very high patriotic motivation and a sense of duty that continues to grow. This is the moment for me to once again convey the congratulations of the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces and the highest authorities of Burkina Faso to the fighting forces, to the volunteers for the defense of the homeland. And to our enemies, the message remains the same: flee Burkina Faso or die.
So, of course, this is where we bring this edition of News from the Front to a close. Thank you for following us. We'll see you again very soon.